All right, my incredible star family. I hope you guys are ready for story time. We're going to continue on with our live read of the Prism of Lyra. So, just inviting everyone as you're getting prepared to dive into this live read, that I invite you to, as always, please just shield up with your own discernment as far as connecting to your guardian councils, to your guardian teams, to allow yourself to really be able to dive into receiving this information. But again, through your own filters of discernment, that as you listen to it, take what resonates for you, let go of the rest. This is so exciting to get to read these books together because it really helps us dive into some of these I like to call the oldies but goodies. Because this book, as we dive into the Prism of Lyra, we're going to see was definitely something that came out. I believe the first edition we were looking at was in 1989. And this is amazing that we're really getting into a timeline in our history where we can really receive a lot of this information now. So we're just going to go ahead and dive right in. We made it through chapter 1 through 4 already. We're going to start with chapter 5. And within this, again, we are reading The Prism of Lyra, an exploration of human galactic heritage with Lisa Royale and Keith Priest. This is a great book it's a short but sweet book in that it goes through a lot of the key players in our galactic history. So with that, let's just go ahead and dive in, and we're starting right up with chapter 5. And with chapter 5, this one is The Winds of Orion. Begirt with many a blazing star stood the great giant Algebar, Orion, hunter of the beast. His sword hung gleaming by his side, and on his arm the lion's hide, scattered across the midnight air the golden radiance of its hair. This was written by Longfellow. Cast thou bind the sweet influence of the Pleiades, or lose the bands of Orion? Question mark. This is actually from Job chapter 38, verse 31. So, as we dive into this, we've been through a few of the different chapters. Some of these chapters we've been through already have started to kind of touch us into the story of Lyra, a bit of the story of the Sirius star system. And now we're going to dive into Orion and the Pleiades and Arcturus. So we're going to see if we can get through a few more chapters in this read today. In this one, now diving into the stories of Orion. When two opposite polarities meet, they are naturally attracted. When they attempt fusion rather than integration, they produce a force of enormous energy. They produce sparks, they produce change, sometimes they even produce pain. This is the case with the civilizations of Lyra that attempted integration within the Vegan and Sirius star systems. The conflict began playing out there, but it was energetically expanded to include Orion. Its beginnings were as a Lyran conflict. Through generations, it evolved into a new race's war, that of the Orions. As generations passed, each side lost touch with what they were fighting for, yet the anguish continued. The stakes were clearly marked. The negative side perpetuated the idea of service to self. Within their philosophy, if one served the self, the whole was served. What they did not realize was that they were denying the whole by the way that they chose to carry out this philosophy. This translated as the need for domination. These were dark times indeed. Domination entailed behavior that Earth humans have never experienced. Genetic manipulation of bloodlines was common in an attempt to dilute or concentrate power. What humans know as black magic was a common practice. Beings were so saturated with their own fear that they struck out at all who were different. The earth legends of sword and sorcery are dim remembrances carried in the etheric cell memory from the dark times of Orion. The positive side epitomized the idea of service to others. It was their belief that the only way to survive was to be subservient, even at the expense of the self. So, an interesting dynamic was played out. There were those individuals who were the dominators and those who were all too willing to play the victim role. These positives felt that to support the whole, they must serve the whole and relinquish the self. In reality, they were denying themselves as being part of a valid portion of that whole. The Orion civilization was one of the very few that evolved into a state of technological advancement while still being in a state of intense spiritual conflict. Eons of time passed while the drama continued playing out. It began with the basic emotional manipulation all the way to the other end of the spectrum. Manipulation using highly advanced technologies and technological tools. Reincarnationally speaking, the same soul incarnated time and time again, switching sides, trying to find a way to bring the whole struggle into balance. We see this a lot in the Voyagers books with the whole concept of the victim victimizer program, playing both sides to constantly keep trying to find the balance. Within Orion's history, there has always been underground resistance. Throughout the ages, its strength ebbed and flowed like the pulses of the red giant Beetlejuice. Usually they would be discovered by the negatives, disbanded, and punished. Anytime they built up some momentum, it radiated too loudly and they were found. As the philosophy of the resistance solidified, it became apparent that they needed to squelch the radiation of their ideas. They decided instead to symbolically absorb. They allowed people to come to them. They became like a black hole which was unable to be seen, but the force and momentum of their energy was as powerful as a silent wind. Their organization was thus called the Black League. The symbol of their struggle became the Black Dragon. A new aspect of the drama began to unfold. Now there were these three facets to the struggle. There were the dominators, the victims, and the resistance, fueled by the friction of the two polarities. The Black League became quite successful in thwarting the efforts of the dominators, known as the Orion Empire. However, it was only enough to reduce their momentum. An energy impasse was reached. Within the souls of these repressed people existed a great desperation. They knew the extent of the Orion Empire's control. The Empire had devised ways to control astral bodies. Death was no longer freedom. Many individuals studied with heretic teachers to learn the ancient knowledge of dimensional consciousness travel. Few were successful, but those who were found a way out of the Orion system forever. Through focused concentration and disengagement from the Orion mass consciousness belief systems, a small percentage of individuals were able to leave their bodies or die, and were successfully able to target or hone in on beings who had escaped or were reincarnated on Earth from Orion. Once these beings were targeted, the Orion entity was able to create a window through which he or she could travel. When he or she came through that window and incarnated on Earth, that being became lost in the Earth mass consciousness. This was a safety mechanism. If they did not know their own identity, they could not be pursued by the Orion Empire. This is, let's actually kind of touch on this because this is actually really huge right here, you guys. So it's talking about like that the only way that people were able to escape the Orion Empire was to basically do massive spiritual ascension types of consciousness travel or consciousness practices. But they knew that even if they traveled somewhere and they retained any kind of memory of where they'd come from, they would actually still be targeted by the Orion Empire. So they basically created a way to focus their concentration in order to actually, at the time of death, end up somewhere else, to consciously move soul travel so that they could focus on reincarnating into another system. This is very, very important because this is really where we're at right now here on Earth. A lot of the reincarnation is just not knowing how to travel at the time of death in order to break free from the gravitational pull or the gravitational hold of the Earth that keeps us reincarnating here through a lot of these reversal systems. But it's interesting here that part of their tactic was to actually reincarnate on Earth, or incarnate on Earth from Orion, but with no memory of who they were, so that they couldn't be actually trailed or followed or identified by the Orion Empire. If you can read between the lines on what that is saying their technology is so advanced, they can follow your soul wherever it reincarnates, that death is not freedom. And that it takes really quite high spiritual mechanics to learn how to break free from a lot of these implants and trackers and different seals and implants that get placed upon us on a soul level, or sometimes even on an oversoul level, that follow us from incarnation to incarnation. And a lot of what we're doing is dissolving, collapsing, and deleting these tracers and trackers, so that we are not pulled continuously or pursued, as she is saying here, by the Orion Empire. I wanted to just kind of highlight that. That's pretty fascinating. She has this in here. The escapees then entered Earth's reincarnational cycle and most likely continued to play out the Orion drama unconsciously within their soul patterns. At times, they could have been immediately pursued through the window by Orion Empire representatives. Often, these Empire representatives became caught in Earth's mass consciousness as well and had to enter the reincarnational cycle. When they incarnated, they carried their old Orion desire for control with them. As the desperation grew, the Black League decided to fight even harder. They had people who played on both sides. Smuggled reports from informants resulted in an even more intense resistance effort. They began to employ tactics borrowed from the dominators. All this was done in the name of freedom. They eventually learned that freedom was elusive, and the conflict intensified. With all of their efforts, the Black League could not understand why they were not being successful in liberating the victims. They became discouraged. The people hungered for a form of spirituality, but all that was present was a gnawing emptiness and fear. Nothing worked. For a few generations, the Black League remained stagnant, only an idea and nothing more. Then something miraculous occurred. During generations of spiritual gestation, a seed began to grow. A soul incarnated who embodied all the hopes and dreams of the Orion races and had none of the hatred or fear. When he was born, he was safely contained in an energetically and emotionally neutral environment deep within the planet, so that he would not become polarized. At adulthood, he began to teach. What he taught began to shed new light on the struggle. What he proposed could end it all, once and for all. He taught universal laws. Positivity cannot be achieved through negativity. The Black League was fighting fire with fire, only creating a blaze instead of peace. One must integrate positivity and negativity to the balance point. One must love, not fear. The ideas of peace and freedom must be loved so much that one is willing to live in it, in one's souls, despite outside manifestations. The Black League thus learned that their intentions were good, but their actions only caused more of what they despised. This realization occurred on a mass level. It opened new doors of spirituality for the people of these oppressed worlds. They had a long way to go, but at least now they knew where to start. Once the dynamics began to be understood from higher levels, transmute this energy by moving outward into the galaxy and starting fresh. From these higher levels, they called upon the founders to assist them in choosing a world. Of primary concern was an assurance that all the tools were provided in this new world for these adventurous beings to begin transmutation of the Orion energy. Free will, choice, was the primary tool, as well as a latent DNA code that would trigger a desire for societal preservation when, if it became possible for them to self-destruct. The world that was chosen was Earth. The founders then began engaging various physical groups to carry out the Earth's inception. Earth has manifested the Orion drama in an attempt to balance polarity throughout humankind's history. The fall of Atlantis, the Roman Empire, and the ongoing religious wars are all examples of memory patterns from Orion that are emerging to be cleared. Throughout all of these dramas, the human race has survived and has kept total oppression at bay. Humanity continues to play out the same dynamic. victims, perpetrators, and resistance. However, this time, light is beginning to spread, and even the resistance is beginning to learn early on that one can't fight fire with fire. The contemporary Orion civilization, existing in the same time continuum as present day Earth, has already healed its conflict. Because Earth is still playing out Orion's past in an attempt to balance it for itself. The primary contact humanity receives from Orion has been judged to be negative. The Men in Black phenomena, as well as some manifestations of the Illuminati structure, are playing out the past Orion need for control. The Men in Black have several origins. Some are human incarnations from Orion and or negatively oriented Sirius energy. Others are actual past Orions who have traveled forward in time to present-day Earth. These include Empire representatives who were caught in Earth's mass consciousness as they pursued Orion escapees. They perceive Earth as a threat. From their point of view, as humanity awakens and liberates itself, it magnetizes the oppressed Orion beings to seek freedom here. They want to keep these windows of opportunity closed for the victims of Orion and keep Earth unempowered and stay in total control. The Men in Blacks are only one manifestation of this idea. Generally, it is played out on Earth in a much more subtle way. Those individuals who carry the oppressive patterns from Orion act from their soul memory and are not necessarily conscious in their desire for absolute control. In researching 20th century Men in Black encounters, one comes across the ironic behavior of these beings. They function at a very autonomous level and seem to never claim for themselves the power that they so single-mindedly attempt to wrestle from humans. This may suggest that the Men in Black is only a pawn in perhaps an even more bizarre power struggle. The Orion drama is not an experiment done to someone by someone else. All those who choose to be part of the Earth's transmutation do so from their own free will. This transmutation and integration will affect the entire galactic family created through the dimensional infusion. This would initiate the beginning process of the integration back through the prism of Lyra. The integrated polarities can thus be termed the Orion light. There were stages built into the transmutation project from which the founders would be able to gauge its progress. The first stage was simple, seeding and developing of third density life into a strong genetic strain on Earth. The subsequent stages involved various developments of civilization. The crucial stage is occurring presently upon the Earth, the mass reawakening of millions of souls to a greater spiritual purpose. This awakening occurs naturally and begins to accelerate in a widening of the gap between the positive and the negative poles as seen presently within society. The accentuation of this gap serves to polarize and highlight the choices society may take, making it clear that choices must be made at this point in time. Humanity does not have the ugliness and pain of a tormented past to the extent that Orion had. As Earth reawakens, all the tools become visible for humanity to claim responsibility for the whole and the self. The painful Orion memories may continue to surface, but the healing of them will occur through humanity's proclamation of freedom and choice. When the dimensional infusion occurs, there were some individual and group consciousnesses who choose to remain dormant. They allowed themselves to serve as archetypes that could be awakened as needed. Some even allowed fragments of themselves to incarnate. An example of this is the consciousness known as Merlin. During the time of the Orion drama, the friction between the two polarities awakened the sleeping magician. He became a guiding force in the drive to integrate from both a physical and non-physical point of view. Fragments of his consciousness would incarnate intermittently to spark a memory of the past and a vision of the future. He has gone by many names on many worlds, but he always mirrors one's own beauty as well as one's own ugliness. His energy has been present in association with Earth's right from the very inception. The Earth inception will be examined more thoroughly in the coming chapters. For the time being, it must be shared that this drama has been created to be a success. Most who incarnate upon Earth are involved to varying degrees in the Orion drama. Everyone is here by choice. The instant that one begins operating from a belief that humanity is here against its will is the instant that a personal and planetary power has been surrendered. So as we look at this, I do want to take a couple thoughts on this. One thing that she keeps saying over and over is to recognize that the Orion dramas were so much more even that we are seeing here on Earth. And I think that's kind of a big thing to kind of remember because, even as we see the Earth dramas that are going on here, there is a recognition. The more you learn galactic history, the more you will find yourself going like, oh my gosh, Earth really does feel like a soap opera or a repeat of the Orion dramas. But there are times really tapping into your cellular memory that you might go like, wow, remembering how heinous and how just dark it really was in the Orion system uh, does make another way to begin to view the things that are going on here on Earth. And this last sentence, even though sometimes the way things are written kind of feels like it's reversed. But what they're saying here, what she says here in the very end, is that as long as we remember that we are here by choice, we initiate our power. But the instant that one starts to believe that we are forced here or we don't have a choice in that we're here, our power is surrendered and it is given away. And whether or not we feel as though we've maybe been here a few cycles longer than we intended, the more that we recognize the free will choice that we did have a heart and a compassion to be the Christos mission for what is going on here on Earth, I really feel that this is the power for beginning to awaken the energy within us to remember and to recognize that we can break free from the gravitational field of the reincarnational cycles of Earth. This is something I feel is a great passion within myself. Is I probably say this every book read that we do together, but one of the passions is really this feeling that we need to remember how to die right, so that we don't keep getting stuck in these reincarnational cycles. So now, as we move through kind of recognizing the traumas in Orion, let's see how this now starts to play with the energy of the Pleiades and Earth's Pleiadian cousins. So, chapter 6, Earth's Pleiadian cousins. Many a night from yonder ivied casement, ere I went to rest, did I look upon great Orion, sloping slowly to the west. Many a night I saw the Pleiades raising through the mellow shade, glitter like a swarm of fireflies tangled in a silver braid. And this was written by Tennyson. Earth's Pleiadian cousins. During the early development of the Lyran system, the first friction between polarities began to occur. Some Lyrans manifested the idea of the feminine polarity, intuitive and allowing. They believed the path to reintegration was through inner development. Other Lyrans, however, polarized to the masculine. Their philosophy upheld the notion that in order to evolve, they had to dominate the known universe. This caused much dissension between the two. As the Lyran civilization developed, a group of Lyrans decided they would prefer to develop their culture away from what they perceived were negative influences. Thus, they searched the galaxy for a new home. In their search, they found a young planet rich in natural resources. This planet was Earth. For several generations, this group resided on Earth, coexisting peacefully with the developing primate race. However, over a long period of time, they found that they were not adapting to Earth's physical and electromagnetic environment as well as they desired. During this time, they incorporated small amounts of genetic material from the primates to assist them in assimilating to the Earth's environment. Over generations, their DNA changed slightly, allowing them to become more adapted to Earth. While these Earth Lyrans were incorporating primate genetics into themselves, other groups of Lyrans were on the planet to carry out the founder's wishes as well as their own by inserting Lyran genetics into the primates. The arrival of these Lyrans refueled the conflicts the Earth Lyrans initially escaped from, so they chose to find another planetary system to colonize. Desiring to build a new culture where they could become isolated from old conflicts rooted in their past, they explored the region widely before they decided upon an open cluster of young blue stars known as the Pleiades. When the Pleiadian star system began to be colonized by Earth Lyrans, it was intended to be very balanced, independent race. This was reflected in their choice of a new, stable star cluster. More than anything else, they desired to create a culture based on harmony, truth, and unconditional love. Once the colonization plan became known, those of Lyran descent who desired a new home decided to colonize other areas of the Pleiadian star cluster as well. These early Pleiadians, who were the previous Earth Lyrans, possessed highly developed intuitive skills as well as an inbred desire to create a community lifestyle. The whole was as important as the self. Even with the desire, it took these beings generations to mature and create their own identity separate from their Lyran roots. For generations, they developed this new culture, which was philosophical in nature and technologically progressing at a rate perfect for their development. Though there were several periods of conflict, the cultural base that these new Pleiadians created remained stable for many thousands of years. Over generations, the community oriented Pleiadians began to favor peace and tranquility so much that they learned to invalidate all forms of negativity. Deeper and deeper, they submerged their natural humanoid tendencies until a great emptiness appeared within their being. There was no conflict resolution or learning. A voice cried out from within them. There was a portion of them that desired to be heard. From this well of despair, they reached out to their Lyran forefathers. When the call was answered, the Lyrans were surprised to find a culture that had virtually cut itself off from creation. The Pleiadians had no knowledge of what was occurring in the universe around them. They were unaware of the anguish of Orion, even though they were both descendants of Lyra. When the Pleiadians were made aware of the Orion struggle, their own sleeping dragon awakened. They felt a passion. Once again, they felt alive. A deep mission was sparked within their souls. They offered to be of service within the Orion struggle. It was then that they committed themselves to fighting the Orion negativity. Thus it began. They entered the Orion struggle through many vehicles. Some souls chose to incarnate directly into the system within both polarity orientations, positive and negative, in order to understand the struggle. The majority of these Pleiadians incarnating into the Orion struggle became ensnared. It is easy to enter the Orion reincarnational cycle, but virtually impossible to escape. Others chose to ally themselves with the Black League or continue to incarnate within the Pleiadian system and attempt to contain the expansion of the Orion Empire. They fought with every ounce of their being against the negativity they saw around them. Unconsciously, they also fought the negativity still further within themselves. The struggle continued. The Pleiadians fought as zealously against the Orion negativity as they did their own latent shadow selves. Instead of finding a truth within, they only perpetuated their hatred of their own negativity. It was only when the Orion Empire destroyed one of their populated planets that they disengaged themselves actively from the Orion struggle. The lifeless, charred planet still stands in their system as a reminder of their past actions. When that planet was obliterated, the Pleiadians were devastated. Finally, an impasse was reached. On the highest levels of being, every consciousness involved in the Orion drama took a step back. They evaluated the situation. It became obvious that the resolution needed to occur from a different angle. They agreed to extend the conflict to another arena within the galaxy. The Pleiadians were faced with a choice. They would return their energies to their homeworlds, or they could agree to resolve their own issues as well as the Orion struggle once and for all. Initially, they chose to return home. This allowed them to gather their strength and search the very depths of their souls to find a way to become whole. They were so afraid of the negativity that they became immobilized. They waited, they pondered, and they faltered. While they waited, the Inception Project began in full force upon the Earth. The Lyrans were the physical directors of the project under the founders, accepting assistance from other physical groups such as the Syrians. It quickly became apparent that they needed a genetic structure of terrestrial as well as extraterrestrial origin for their Inception Project. They contacted the Pleiadians. At first, the Pleiadians expressed reluctance about becoming involved with Earth once again. However, the Lyrans pointed out possible Pleiadian benefits with the deft craftiness that they had, knowing that the Pleiadians had originally incorporated Earth primate genetics into themselves. The Lyrans admitted that they needed a certain aspect of Pleiadian DNA for the developing terrain species upon Earth. Unknowingly, they also created a way for Pleiadians to face their negativity once and for all. It was proposed that a DNA transfer from the Pleiadians into the Terran species over a long period of time would create a race of humanoids who would be terrestrial but would also have extraterrestrial roots. The closest ancestors of those Earth humans would be the Pleiadians, and though these family ties to the Pleiadians would be allowed to be involved with the Earth species and their development, during this involvement, they would also observe the developing race, interact intermediately in order to keep them on course, and learn about human negativity. This vicariously would heal the pain of the Pleiadian past. After some reluctance to associate once again with the Lyrans, a group of Pleiadians finally agreed. From this agreement came thousands of years of Pleiadian interaction with nearly every primitive culture upon the Earth. Drawings of space beings and spacecraft adorn many cave walls, and many ancient documents record the actions of these gods who came from the sky. They saw themselves as gods no more than today's humans do. However, from the point of view of a primitive people, they surely must have seemed like gods. During certain developmental stages of a humanoid species, it is common to give up personal power to a godlike or magical figure. This became widespread, and soon the Pleiadians began to relish the power they were given. They began to wield it. Some began using fear in order to manipulate. Their soul level agreement to learn from the developing Earth transformed into a situation of personal desire. Many ancient myths concerning jealousy directly linked to these experiences and these extraterrestrial brings from other systems, including the Pleiades. When these power binges occur, it was necessary for these extraterrestrials to be reminded of their purpose. Very often, resentment built up on the part of the Pleiadians towards other visiting groups. For a period of a few thousand years, the Pleiadians grew in power and then were consistently reminded of their place. The irony of the situation soon became known to them, and that they had wished to get in touch with their negativity. Their wish had been granted. During these interactions, the Pleiadians involved with Earth were all from the same time continuum. Their contacts were consistent with their development. They had not yet mastered the complex technology of time-space manipulation. It wasn't until the 12th century that Earth has begun to pull in Pleiadian contact from many different time frames simultaneously. Though contact continued intermittently until the present day, it was slowed in comparison to earlier times. Most Pleiadians no longer consider Earth humans to be children, and they allow humanity to make its own choices. Once Earth began its technological era, it was watched very closely for the critical mass necessary to activate the DNA code for preservation of the species. Since the 1940s, both physical and non-physical extraterrestrials have been monitoring humanity and attempting communication, mostly in subtle ways. The Pleiadians were the first to begin a major benevolent contact program physically with Earth. Although this was quietly carried out as early as the 1930s, it began to be noticed on a wider scale in the 1970s. A Swiss named Billy Meyer had documented hundreds of hours of communication with the Pleiadian cosmonaut Somjazi. He also possesses a large number of photographs of the Pleiadians' starcrafts, which, using photographic technology, have never been proven to be false. He claims to have been taken both backwards and forward in time by the Pleiadians and their allies, the DALs, to view various events. This contact has caused major controversy since it was revealed. Meyer had been provided with evidence by the Pleiadians themselves, such as a metal sample which was analyzed on film by a noted IBM scientist. The analysis revealed an unusual combination of materials, including a rare and expensive element called thulium. Also, when analyzed further, the sample seemed to be displaying properties of both metal and crystal. The metal sample subsequently disappeared, but the film analysis remains. Within the UFO research community, this case is a classic example of throwing the baby out with the bathwater because it is too easy to be considered to be fraudulent. When Meyer attempted to construct models of Pleiadian spacecraft to see if the photographs could be faked, the models were found and the whole case was labeled a hoax. The teachings from the 1970s from some Simjazi and her associates are now beginning to be more widely known. They teach spiritual truths as well as give a partial history of the Pleiadian race. Some teachings warn of impending natural and man-made disasters connected with the new age to come. It seems that these Pleiadian beings were from an orientation of their history, where warning histories about approaching cataclysm was part of their contact philosophy. Though these teachings may have been applicable when they were given, one may question how they relate to today's mass consciousness. There are indications that the mass consciousness of Earth made a shift from a future of disaster to one of increasing responsibility during the time period of the 1980s to 1982. Since these Pleiadian teachings were given before the shift was made, perhaps they represent an old idea. It does not necessarily mean that they are not valid, but it does mean that perhaps there are different outlooks coming to humanity instead. One which reflects the choices and changes humanity has recently made on a mass consciousness level. The Pleiadian contact coming to us presently, both physical and telepathic forms, may echo a different voice. Some claim to be from the future descendants, of Meyer Pleiadians. These Pleiadians speak openly of their difficult past and why they felt they needed to use certain tactics in dealing with Earth. They admit to have their own motivations for contact and thank this planet for all that they have learned. They are helping society to shed light on other forms of contact in which they themselves are not directly involved, such as negative abduction experiences. They are sincerely assisting humanity by whatever means they can, allowing the planet to achieve a goal, a global as well as galactic viewpoint. The Pleiadians have specific reasons for being tentative in their present interactions with Earth. For thousands of years, they have stepped in either to protect us from danger or to control us like children for their own good. Some splinter groups even manipulated humankind for its own purposes. This has been a source of great shame to them. They now realize that humanity must make its own choices and they must trust the human ability to do so. They have created a karmic cycle through their own interference. For their own growth, it is imperative that the cycle be relinquished. The thought of perpetuating the pattern of interference on Earth is the single most fearful idea to a Pleiadian. Will Pleiadian contact with Earth continue in the future? Since they are the most similar to Earth human physically in our fourth density form, it seems appropriate that they become one of the first to walk this planet undisguised. They stress, however, that as much as humanity might want to meet its cousin from the sky, they will not initiate an open contact program until humanity can embrace its brothers across the street. It is up to this planet. It is humanity who is calling the shots. We are finally ready to let go of the fear of recognizing our heritage and accept their outstretched hands. Are we? They're asking this. So that's the end of the Pleiadian chapter. And it's just basically asking, are we ready to let go of the fear and recognize our heritage and accept the outstretched hands of these different races and beings. I will say that, and this will be an invitation for each of you as you are hearing this chapter on the Pleiades. And I will say there's been moments through the Orion chapter and the Lyran chapter, and even the Syrian chapters, you hear it, again, this is information that is coming through. Utilize your own discernment. But what I love about hearing it in this book about the Pleiades, really hear it as the metaphor that it is, as the story that it is, as the dynamic that it is, that even within this, that when you really read between the lines, you're hearing the duality of this very star system of the Pleiades. That within the Pleiades, there's multiple different agendas within that star system. And this book gives a little bit of a different perspective of the birthing of the Pleiades, as far as Lyran's moving from Earth to the Pleiades, vice versa to how we hear it in many other terms of Pleiadians kind of then falling into the Earth field. So within that, as you just listen to this, really what we want to take is balancing. What are we healing? What are we clearing within ourselves as we go through this? Because there is going to be a lot of contact from some of these places, and we want to use our Christic shields to really work with discernment. What are the energies or the agendas behind? And just for fun, the term Samjazi, this is a Pleiadian being that Billy Meyer had contact with. Samjazi is also referred to within the Voyagers books, and the Voyagers books has a completely other perspective of that energy. So it's helpful to read them both, pick what feels correct or right for you. Let's dive right into chapter 7. The gateway of Arcturus. Verily, when a person departs from this world, he goes to the wind. It opens out, therefore him like the whole of a chariot wheel. Through it he mounts higher. He goes to the sun. It opens out, therefore him like a hole of a drum. He goes to the moon. He goes to the world that is without sorrow. And this is something from the Upanishads. So, the Gateway of Arcturus, chapter 7. I'm sorry, I'm not really showing you guys the pictures very well. So, within this, as we dive into chapter 7, Arcturus. When passing through the Prism of Lyra, there were some beings who decided to remain in non-physical form. These beings lovingly choose an existence of service to those of the more dense realities, such as third density Earth. They realize that on a developing physical world, the evolving life may need assistance from other realms. This assistance would come in the form of archetypes, angels, guides, and unseen inspiration. These beings were attracted to the area of the star Arcturus. During their initial attraction, the star field in the Arcturus region was slightly different from its present manifestation, but the energy of the area remains constant. There is a gateway or crossroads in the fabric of time and space in the general area of Arcturus. These beings soon realized this gateway passed dimensionally through almost every other area inhabited from the dimensional infusion. It was then that they began to understand their purpose to aid consciousness from many levels of awareness. The Arcturian purpose was multifaceted. One idea is that they serve humankind as an ideal. They represent the future self of an individual or a society. Their energy is, by its nature, a magnet that draws out positive potential and integration from the very depths of being. They reflect to Earth where it is heading in its evolution. Humanity evolves into non-physicality, the ideal goal is to achieve a consciousness similar to that of the Arcturian mass consciousness. They recognize themselves as a group matrix committed to the idea of the evolution of consciousness. Very often, Arcturian beings will manifest to humans as angels. It is known that one of the purposes of an angel is to serve humankind. In a very real sense, the Arcturians have a dedication to humanoid kind. They have chosen to learn about physicality through physical beings. They are etheric in nature. Their energy can be felt as a presence, a surge of creativity, or unconditional love. They will manifest according to the belief system of the person with whom they are interacting. To the more traditionally religious, it will be angels. To some of the more modern seekers, perhaps as extraterrestrials or future selves, either way, the outcome is the same, an interaction with a truly loving being devoted to the service of physical beings and thus the whole. Because they serve physicality, they interact not only with the humanoid beings upon the planet, but also with the unseen kingdoms whose evolution is different from that of humanoids. Each planet has its own Davic kingdoms. The consciousness energy of the plant, mineral, and animal kingdoms, and the Arcturian energy acts as a higher aspect of a planet's Devic kingdom. Again, they repeat the idea of reflecting the future evolutionary ideal. There are a small number of Arcturians who choose to experience physicality in order to serve. Rather than entering physicality through the birth process, they choose to walk in an already existing body on a physical world. They do not have the need or the karmic compulsion, so to speak, to enter through the incarnation process. By various agreements between souls, a trade is established. The soul of a human who is emotionally in pain will enter the Arcturus realm for healing, and the curious Arcturian will temporarily embody upon a planet. The primary service of the Arcturians provide for a physical being um, and that of emotional healing. Arcturus is more of a realm than an actual place, and within the realm of Arcturus, Earth souls who have had traumatic deaths or lives are healed and rejuvenated. Because the gateway of Arcturus connects dimensionally with Earth, all who incarnate on Earth must pass through the Arcturus realm before they reach the planet, unless they consciously choose not to. This provides a healing for those about to be born and a strengthening of their choices and desires for the physical life about to occur. The gateway of Arcturus prepares non physical consciousness for the intense focus of physicality and thus sexuality. From the Arcturian point of awareness, physicality and sexuality are the same expression. The Arcturus energy is particularly adept at various forms of sexual healing, such as in the case of sexual abuse during childhood or adulthood. The healing energies of Arcturus are equally nurturing for the abused and the abuser, for both are in much pain. The utilization of the Sirius and Arcturus healing matrix can be quite powerful in such cases. The cetaceans, especially dolphins, can represent the Sirius Arcturus matrix to those in pain. Since dolphins are quite sexual and unconditionally loving in their expression, they can serve as a physical manifestation of the Sirius Arcturus healing matrix. This matrix is totally non-threatening, providing subtle healing on very deep levels. At death, the human consciousness passes through the Arcturus realm. There they are nurtured and cared for until they awaken to their greater reality. In the case of traumatic death, a great tenderness and healing is shared so that the soul about to awaken makes a smooth transition. In after-death experiences, the light that is perceived at the end of the tunnel is actually a representation of the Arcturus vibration. This vibration will be translated through the perceiver's own belief system. Because Arcturus is primarily sixth density, it is often perceived as the Christ or Buddhic vibration. The light can be equated with the future or higher Christ self of an individual. So in a sense, during the death process, one is merging with the higher self, which happens to share a frequency range nearly identical to the Arcturus realm. There, healing occurs. In all creation, there is nothing that heals, nurtures, and rejuvenates the human spirit as completely as the Arcturus vibration. Another idea that is synonymous with the Arcturus vibration is the idea of creativity. When one is creating, one aligns with the energy of the Creator. Since Arcturus serves as a messenger of the Creator, so to speak, the vibrations are quite similar. In this way, Arcturus has been intimately bound to humanity from the beginning, since humanity is always creating. Arcturus is much more than a star. It is a frequency that one possesses within. It is a frequency of creation, healing, and evolution. It has been with Earth and other developing physical planets from their inception. It is less a character in the galactic family story than an undercurrent, one that is ever present in the entire dimensional infusion idea. Because the energy of Arcturus is an undercurrent that consistently interacts with us, the Earth planetary environment often translates Arcturian energy into a form that is meant to trigger individuals emotionally. An example of this is the lenticular cloud, a spectacular cloud formation that molds itself into a disc shape. It may look like a spacecraft, but most of the time it is merely the Earth's environment translating the energy it perceives at an etheric level. These etheric ships serve once again to remind humanity of its unseen connections. Within polarized reality, Arcturus has chosen a counterpart to reflect other aspects of its involving nature. Its counterpart is the area called Antares. Within the dimensional gateway or crossroads, there is a joining between Antares and Arcturus, which serves as a major focal point of energy in this region. Most of the consciousness who incarnate on Earth pass only through the Arcturus vibration. There are others who choose to pass through the Antares before they reach Arcturus. These are the individuals who work directly with mass consciousness patterns, matrices, and cellular evolution. Antares is also the dimensional connection point between Earth's quadrant of the Milky Way galaxy and the galaxy Andromeda. The Antares-Andromeda connection energizes the abstract concepts of existence and consciousness necessary for physical races to begin to remember their heritage, thus transmuting their past. Most of the other races explored in this work have more individualized agreements with planet Earth. The Arcturus connection is very fluid, very malleable, and no less important. If one likens all the other characters of the story to ingredients in a cosmic soup, one can see how they all add the flavoring. However, if one likens Arcturus to the consistency of the bouillon in the soup, it is apparent how the Arcturian vibration is a vital ingredient that holds it all together. Many manifestations of the Arcturian energy on Earth can be explored. First, one can say that Arcturus and Sirius form a partnership. Whereas Arcturus works with healing, Sirius facilitates physical healing. The Egyptians knew these connections and called upon the energies of the Sirius Arcturus matrix for assistance in their rituals. The Egyptian deity known as Anubis was a direct Sirian archetype, but worked with the Arcturian energy. Anubis guided individuals into the underworld or the astral or through the process of the physical death. There, the energies of both the Sirius and Arcturus began the healing process with the soul. The representation of the jackal or the dog, as in the dog star of Sirius, as Anubis, is the blatant signal that the Egyptians were aware of the connection. Anubis, as a Sirius prototype, led the departed soul to the Arcturus realm where the healing occurs. Arcturus represents integration as much as Orion represents the conflicting or polarized nature of humanity. The archetype of Merlin has often been labeled a bridge. When two polarities attempt a unification, there must be a common ground they both stand on before the merging occurs. Merlin is thus a bridge between the explosive Orion and the healing Arcturus. He is the common ground. It is apparent how his energy has been of major importance, not only to Earth, but to all who experience polarity. Magic is the spark created from the friction between polarities that ignites transformation. Early in the development of Earth, the Arcturians agreed to density themselves, enough to be perceived temporarily. They interacted with the early culture called Lemuria by teaching healing skills. The memory of these interactions was carried throughout generations. When the Lemurians migrated to many areas of Earth, these memories were carried with them. The statues of Easter Island are one of the few ideas that remain in the physical of their direct interaction. These statues are not meant to represent these densified Arcturians so much as to pay tribute to them. The position of The statues is skyward, gazing at the horizon, waiting for the Arcturians' return. Humanity has never had to wait for their return. The energy has been present all along. If one looks inward instead of outward, they can be found. They are the human race evolved to its highest potential. They remind humanity and edge it forward into the magnificent spiral of evolution. Home is where the heart is, and the heart is the path of Arcturus. So, let's look at this energy really quick. We got about 3 chapters left. We've read for about an hour, and I might save 8, 9, and 10 in the next reading. So, what I'd like to actually kind of highlight with this energy of Arcturus is that we know right now through a lot of the information as far as the J seals, the implants, that we know that the star nation of Arcturus also chose a phantom path. They chose to blend with some of the Syrian star nation. And what I love again about reading this book, The Prism of Lyra, is it gives us an insight into these different star nations. And then as you read it, really begin to take in the qualities of what it is. So what do the Arcturians have gifts of? They are such an incredible race line. But we also want to remember that the phantom Arcturians are one of the most devastating energies that is implanted not only Nibiru and diodic crystals, J seals on the planet, false crystalline grids upon the planet. They have been one of the key players for pulling the consciousness of Earth into these phantom matrices through these reversal ascension mechanics. They are brilliant. They are brilliant at emotions. They are brilliant at healing. They are brilliant with integrative consciousness. They truly are gatekeepers of this very, very special Stargate. So I would just put this invitation out there to each and every one of you as you connect through your galactic heritage to your star families, whether it's Pleiadian, Arcturian, Orion energy, Syrian energy, Lyran energy, as we are talking about these so far. Please utilize your highest discernment. Make sure that as you communicate or connect to any of them, that you make sure that you are connecting to those in alignment to the Christic forces, to the Christ sun, to the Aquiline sun, that you are connecting to those that are holding the Christos mission in alignment to the Emerald Order, and that as you connect to these beings, it becomes easy to catch any deception from any of these false ascended masters, false lights, or again, as she was saying it right in there, these Arcturians many times will be the white light that you will follow at the time of death. Well, we also know that we want to be very mindful of which light are we following. And unfortunately, this dearly beloved family line of the Arcturians has become heavily compromised through galactic history. So we want to make sure we are connecting to the true Christic lineage and Christic families so that you can catch the phantom energies. Because I will say when I work with individuals, and there are many of you that may have had this experience, those of you that have been tagged, hit, implanted by these phantom or negative Arcturian energies, it is devastating to the body. There's been individuals that I have seen go through tremendous physical and mental types of things to have to heal or repair because of how we are at knowing our biology, our psychology, and our emotional bodies. So I say all of this with so much love. These books give us an opportunity to really kind of bring next level of discernment. You can see at the time that this was written in 1989 that there's kind of like a sense of like, yeah, there's light and dark, but there's still kind of a flavor of a blanket love for the Arcturians or a blanket love for the Pleiadians. And we want to recognize it still at this moment in time. Discernment is needed more than ever as we connect to these different races and beings and recognize that yes, you have that compass right inside of you. So with so much love, I'm going to end it there. And that'll be leaving us with 3 more chapters to do in the final read when we read the last segment for the Prism of Lyra. So with so much love, thank you guys for sharing this live read with me, and I will catch you at the next live read.